Our story kicks off with Jake Green, a Cockney gambler stepping out of prison after a 7-year stretch. 2 years later, fueled by a desire for payback, he and his brother Billy walk into a high-stakes casino owned by the formidable crime boss Dorothy Macha. Their target? The money Macha owes them. Ignoring the cautious advice of his bodyguard Paul, Macha, in a display of arrogance, allows Jake to join his exclusive poker game. On their way up, Jake's claustrophobia kicks in at the sight of the elevator, but the other bodyguards remind him of the 20-floor climb, forcing him to confront his anxiety and step inside. At the table, Jake's initial bet is a seemingly casual chip toss against another player, which he deliberately loses. This is all part of his intricate plan to lull Macha into a false sense of security. When he proposes the same bet with Macha, Jake wins big, much to Macha's surprise. Billy and Jake quickly gather their winnings and make for the exit. Their escape is intercepted by a mysterious man named Zach, who warns them of impending danger and offers his assistance, handing Jake a cryptic card. This time, Jake opts for the stairs, but before he can even take a step, he collapses. As he lies unconscious, the card from Zach is revealed, bearing the ominous message, "Take the elevator." Panic sets in for Macha as Jake is rushed to the hospital. He confides in Paul, convinced that Jake's 7 years of confinement, coupled with a past incident involving his sister-in-law, have fueled a burning desire for significant revenge. Consequently, Macha orders Paul to hire the most lethal hitman around to eliminate Jake. At the hospital, initial tests offer no explanation for Jake's blackout. Doctors advise him to rest at home while awaiting blood test results. Billy returns to his own home, while Jake, under Macha's supposed protection, is escorted by bodyguards. However, their arrival at Jake's residence turns into a bloodbath, as all the bodyguards are swiftly gunned down. Jake narrowly escapes death by spotting another card on the floor that reads, "Pick this up." Bending down to retrieve it saves him from the gunfire. He attempts to flee in his car, but the driver is also shot. Just when things look dire, Zach reappears, pulling Jake from the chaos and whisking him away to safety. Sorter, the usually infallible hitman, is dumbfounded by his failure to kill Jake. He can only rationalize it by suspecting someone tipped Jake off. Yet, when confronted by an enraged Macha, Sorter lies, attributing his miss to a vague bad feeling. Meanwhile, Zach takes Jake to meet his enigmatic partner, Avi. Incredibly, Avi already possesses Jake's confidential medical file. The blood test results are in, delivering a devastating blow. Jake is diagnosed with a rare and fatal blood disease, giving him a mere 3 days to live. Zach and Avi offer Jake their protection, but their terms are stark and non-negotiable. He must surrender all his money and comply with their every demand, including answering any question they pose. They grant him a mere 3 hours to decide. Jake, convinced they are running a con, leaves without a word. Seeking confirmation, Jake obtains his own test results from the hospital. They mirror Avi's. Still skeptical, he suspects Avi and Zach have somehow manipulated the lab. He seeks a second opinion from his trusted private doctor, who delivers the same grim prognosis. Finally accepting the dire reality, especially after a tense moment of threatening his doctor to ensure his honesty, Jake withdraws his substantial savings and returns to accept Zach and Avi's unsettling deal. As they drive, Avi reveals their profession. They are loan sharks, and it will be Jake's own money they will be lending out. After their first stop to deliver funds to a client, Avi presses Jake to recount his history with Macha. Jake narrates the tale of Macha's former henchmen, the 3 remarkably unintelligent Eddies. Before a crucial card game, they found themselves without a skilled player. Knowing Jake's reputation, they recruited him, but only after threatening Billy's family to ensure his compliance. During the game, Jake endured a barrage of insults directed at him and his mother. His breaking point arrived, triggering a violent gunfight. In the ensuing chaos, the lights went out, the money vanished, and Jake found himself framed, his name somehow implicated. To silence him, threats were made against his niece, tragically resulting in the accidental death of his sister-in-law as she tried to protect her daughter. Jake never implicated Macha, the true orchestrator of the games, and served 7 years in prison. During his incarceration, the Eddies somehow incurred Macha's wrath, leading to their gruesome demise. They were used as concrete. After a series of client visits, Zach drops Jake off at a secluded motel. Simultaneously, Macha and Paul seek out the legendary crime kingpin Sam Gold, a figure of ultimate power and influence. However, Gold is notoriously reclusive, so they meet with his composed advisor, Lily Walker. She agrees to broker a drug deal with Macha, but delivers a stern warning. Gold detests publicity and offers no second chances. Later, Jake provides Zach and Avi with more of his dwindling funds. During a chess game with Avi, the conversation turns to Jake's prison experience. He recounts the choice he faced: 14 years of standard imprisonment, or 7 years in solitary confinement. He chose the latter. His cell was nestled between two others, occupied by a chess prodigy and a seasoned con artist, long-term inmates who, despite their silence, seemed to know everything about each other. For the initial 5 years of Jake's sentence, the trio communicated through messages concealed within library books. It was through this clandestine correspondence that Jake learned their infallible formula for winning any game. The two men were plotting an escape and promised to include Jake, but when their opportunity arrived, they vanished without a word, leaving Jake behind. Upon his release 2 years later, Jake discovered they had absconded with all his money, leaving behind a cryptic note: "You can only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent." Inspired by this betrayal, Jake began using the formula to amass his own fortune in various casinos. As the supposed days of his life dwindle, Jake continues his unsettling work, delivering his own money to clients. He is also tasked with threatening those who fail to repay, a task he finds morally repugnant, unable to bring himself to harm desperate individuals. Meanwhile, Avi and Zach are seen in the midst of a daring heist, using a truck to tear down a wall and steal a safe containing the very drugs Matcha had promised Lily. Enraged by the theft, Matcha orders Paul to rectify the situation with extreme urgency. Paul seeks out their rival, the triad boss Lord John. John agrees to supply the needed drugs on short notice, but at an exorbitant price. Jake, Zach, Avi, and their team orchestrate a cunning plan at the hotel where the exchange is to occur. They infiltrate an adjacent room, drill a hole in the wall, and pump in sleeping gas, incapacitating both Matcha's and John's men. They then steal the money and the drugs, meticulously staging the scene to incriminate Matcha in robbing John, and vice versa. Sometime later, Jake receives a worried call from Billy, who has been making inquiries. He has learned that Zach and Avi are figures so dangerous that even gold avoids them, urging Jake to sever ties immediately. Jake disregards his brother's plea and returns to his unsettling work, where he is expected to shoot a terrified client. In a moment of defiance, Jake refuses and attempts to shoot Avi instead, only to discover the gun is empty just before Avi knocks him unconscious. Jake awakens hours later in the motel to a call from Avi, who casually remarks on Jake's survival past his supposed third day and suggests he get a checkup. Following visits from his niece and Billy, who leaves him a gun for self-defense, Jake sees his doctor, who delivers the astonishing news. The initial diagnosis was a complete error. Jake is perfectly healthy. Furious and bewildered, Jake tries to call Avi for answers, but Avi simply tells him he must be patient. Meanwhile, Paul's investigation has unearthed Jake's name as a common thread in the recent disruptions to Matcha's operations. Enraged, Matcha orders Paul to eliminate Jake. Upon Jake's return to the motel, Avi and Zach are waiting with a grave warning. Matcha's thugs are lying in wait inside his room. Jake flees, and the thugs give chase, but he manages to evade them, aided by a comical yet deadly accident where one of the thugs slips and accidentally shoots himself. The remaining criminals discover the body and mistakenly believe Jake is responsible. Jake confronts Avi and Zach at their office. They finally confess that they always knew Jake hadn't revealed the full truth about his past entanglement with the Eddies. It turns out those three dimwits had been lying in wait for Jake upon his release, intent on killing him for causing their dismissal by Matcha. To save his life, Jake had struck a deal. He would pay them a percentage of any money they lent out. Initially, only one Eddie agreed to his 3% offer. But when they saw Jake honor his word, all three wanted in, this time demanding 4%. The ingenious twist? Jake was funding each Eddie's payout with another Eddie's money, ensuring he wasn't actually losing anything. Eventually, the Eddies ran out of their own funds and borrowed heavily from Matcha, who soon became intensely curious about their mysterious money-making associate. After using his prison-acquired formula to amass his own wealth, Jake chose that moment to take a vacation with Billy and his niece. It was during this time that Matcha, furious at the Eddies for their mounting debt, had them brutally murdered. Speaking of Matcha, he's enjoying a tense dinner when his henchmen interrupt with the news of Jake's escape. Sorter, with his keen eye, recognizes Lord John's lover disguised as a waitress. He shoots her before pursuing her driver. However, his aim remains erratic, and he only wounds her. In her dying moments, the woman manages to shoot off Matcha's finger amidst the chaos. Sorter is then dispatched to Lord John's hideout, with orders to eliminate him and his men. Back with Jake, he's engaged in a surreal rooftop golf game with Zach and Avi. They unveil a profound truth. The figure of Sam Gold is a complete fabrication. He doesn't exist. Gold is merely a manifestation of ego, the personification of greed, holding power only over those who subscribe to his influence. The key, they explain, is for Jake to redefine what he allows to control him. Following this revelation, Jake withdraws his remaining fortune from the bank and donates it all. He then infiltrates Matcha's opulent bedroom. Battling the internal voices of his ego, Jake offers a disingenuous apology to Matcha for outsmarting him, acknowledges his supposed superiority as a crime lord, and informs him of the substantial donation made in his name before calmly departing. In a symbolic act of confronting his deepest fears, Jake takes the elevator. Predictably, it grinds to a halt on the ominous 13th floor. As panic threatens to engulf him, he engages in an internal struggle, finally rejecting the insidious grip of his ego, effectively stepping out of the game as a liberated man. When the elevator creakingly resumes its descent, Jake reaches the ground floor to find Matcha waiting, gun in hand, consumed by his own wounded pride and spiraling madness. Yet Jake, now at peace, simply walks past him. This utter lack of fear drives Matcha to the brink, unable to comprehend someone not being terrified by his presence. He breaks down, weeping in the face of his profound humiliation. The next morning, Paul delivers a stack of local newspapers to Matcha. His name is emblazoned across the front pages. Jake's claim of making a donation in Matcha's name was indeed true, and now the public perceives the ruthless casino owner as a benevolent philanthropist. Matcha initially basks in the unexpected positive attention, but his fleeting joy is shattered by Paul's next revelation. Jake possesses the stolen drugs and has been manipulating them all along. Paul, Sorter, and Matcha's remaining enforcers track down Billy. Sensing betrayal from one of his own bodyguards, Billy manages to hide his daughter in a cupboard. Once discovered, Billy is subjected to brutal torture as the thugs demand information about Jake and the missing drugs, refusing to believe his pleas of ignorance. Paul's increasingly violent methods make even the hardened Sorter uncomfortable, particularly when they force the terrified little girl out of hiding after hearing her sobs. In a moment of moral clarity, Sorter rejects his allegiance to Matcha, his own ego dissolving as he methodically and lethally turns on his fellow henchmen. However, in the ensuing chaos, he makes a fatal error and has killed himself. Meanwhile, Matcha receives a visit from the cold and calculating Lily. She presents him with a funeral wreath sent by an enraged Gold, who is furious about Matcha's unwanted publicity. Lily delivers the final blow, informing Matcha that his reign is over and there will be no second chances, plunging him into another wave of desperate panic. Avi and Zach bring Jake and the stolen drugs to Matcha's casino. There, during a final symbolic chess match, Avi finally defeats Jake while confessing the ultimate truth. He and Zach were indeed the silent figures in the adjacent prison cells, and they had always intended to guide Jake to freedom. In a mind-bending twist, Avi implies that he and Zach have been nothing more than manifestations of Jake's own subconscious, guiding him towards self-awareness. However, the moment of realization is cut short, as the casino's bodyguards arrive to escort Jake to Matcha, who now holds Jake's niece hostage. Jake calmly drops the bags of drugs on the floor and reassures his niece that everything will be all right. This unwavering display of fearlessness, even with a gun pointed at the child, shatters Matcha's already fragile psyche. The voices of his own wounded ego reach a desperate conclusion. Jake cannot harm a dead man. In a final tragic act of self-destruction, Matcha puts the gun to his own head and pulls the trigger.